Okay, hello, Sarah, and welcome to the AI SDR movement.
Again, it's good to be on this side of the table. I feel like we keep flip-flopping, and it's good to be over here.
It's good to be here, and I'm excited to talk with you today. So you're our VP of Demand Gen here at Qualified, and today I want to pick your brain about kind of the state of pipeline generation today and how you think AI is going to transform your role and your ability to do your job and how other folks should be thinking about it. So I think let's start at the beginning. Tell me about kind of the state of pipeline generation today. How are you feeling about the world as a demand gen leader?
Yeah, it's so interesting because we say, like, how do you feel about pipe gen right now? And when I think about the answer to this, it's kind of like how we felt always. So it's not like we feel this way because times are different. Like, yes, in the last 2 years, things have gotten more difficult. Resources have been more constrained. But I think just demand gen professionals in general, when I talk to them, the consensus is always the same and it's always hard. Like, no demand gen person do you go to and you're like, how are things going right now? And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so easy. I just crush my numbers time and time again. So I think demand gen is always a difficult role. And we choose this role for that reason. I know myself, I love numbers. I love having goals to hit. And I tend to find that people that end up in these type of roles, they like chasing after these numbers and being very data driven. But with that being said, I do think the reason demand gen is so hard is because those goals are always growing. So even when times are really good, so if you think back to the last time that your company had increasingly good quarter after quarter, you were hitting your targets, they never stayed at that target.
No. You're gifted for a good job with higher targets.
You get 2 days to celebrate.
Yes.
You end the quarter, you go yay, I did it. I hit the goal. And then the next day it's and here's your bigger goal because you did it. And I think that's just always the case with pipeline generation. Demand gen is your goals are always going to grow. And even when you do hit them, you can just anticipate a larger number the next quarter, which makes sense because then as you hit bigger pipe numbers and all of a sudden you have bigger revenue numbers, you have more mouths to feed, more AEs that can use that pipeline and then close it into revenue. So we've kind of termed that here as the pipeline gap. Is every quarter that you get a new number, or every fiscal year, kind of depending on when you get those goals, that number just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And typically when it grows, where you can hit that number stays pretty flat. So you figured it out, you've got the time and resources, your number's here, but suddenly your goal is up here and there's this gap in between it. So I think in demand gen, what we're always thinking about is how can I make up this pipeline gap? Every quarter that goal gets bigger and I've got to find a way to make up that difference.
Mm-hmm. And I think you nailed it. When times are good, your target gets higher. And then when times are hard, your target gets higher because you need more coverage for your account executives. And as a leader, how do you think about closing that pipeline gap that everyone's facing, kind of staring at the beginning of a quarter, the beginning of a fiscal?
Yeah, every time I talk to someone in demand, and I think about this in 2 ways. So I've been at this company since we were a startup. I've worked in startups quite a bit in my career. And I wouldn't say startups are easier necessarily, but where startups have a little bit more benefit is you typically are starting from pretty close to scratch.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a full-blown engine going because you haven't had the resources. You don't have a large team. So when you're looking at a pipeline gap at a startup, you typically have more levers to go look at. So you start in one area that you think is going to be impactful. And it might be ads is a good example. You get Google search going, you find the keywords that you think are going to drive new business to your website, and you really start to just optimize the heck out of it. And then once you feel that's in a good place and you've tested it and you feel it's good enough, then you have something else to move on to. At Qualified, it was events. Okay, now what's our event that we're going to do? And in a startup, there's a lot of different things that you can then move into and test as long as you have a little bit more time and resources. Now, as your company begins to scale and or you join a larger organization that has that demand gen engine pretty well oiled and figured out, the pipeline gap becomes about optimizations. Is you don't always have more resources. Yes, sometimes you will, and sometimes you get an additional headcount, and that's great. Or sometimes you can fight and get more budget when you bring good data and you've got good tests that you've run, and suddenly you can make the case to get more money. But usually it's not going to be such a massive amount that you can just throw more time and resources at one area and see that gap be made up. So instead, what I found is most demand gen professionals are thinking about tweaks and optimizations, whether they're small tweaks, whether they're big tweaks, is you're going to keep going back to your engine and you're going to say where can I make these small changes to get just a little bit more juice out with what I'm already doing? And the things we tend to come back to are ads. You've got your ABM motion. You're going to look at your ABM and say are we looking at the right accounts? Is our messaging right? Are we targeting well enough? Events, like, are we doing the right events, both like sponsored events or owned events, and continue to come back to that and like looking every quarter and every year and saying, like, are these the right things we should be doing? Are the content that you're putting out there, like, are you ranking for SEO? Are you putting out like good content on the market that's like driving new people to your website? And then the last thing I think about is like the lead process of like, how's your website performing? Like, I think we hear demand gen people talk about this all the time. It's like, as soon as things get a little tight or that gap gets a little bit bigger, you immediately go to your website and you're like, is it optimized? Like, what are my forms doing? Where is there drop off? You hear about leaky buckets all the time. Like, where is there a small leak that I can like slap a patch on and like save it so that I can just, again, like squeeze a little bit more out? So I think, again, like startups, you've got a little bit more flexibility to go like start something net new and see if it works for you and do like small tests and then like quickly pivot. But once that engine is running, it is all about like trying to scale and optimize in like small areas.
Mm-hmm. And I think as marketers, we've all been gifted AI, right? We've been gifted this promise of AI and it's going to help you do things better. I'm curious how you think like tactically AI is going to help demand gen professionals close that gap, boost those efficiencies. What's real and tangible in kind of all of this AI hype and craziness that's going on right now?
Totally. And at the very beginning of the AI hype cycle, I remember I kept hearing like, AI is going to make your job easier. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
And
tell me
like,
how. Give me a playbook.
Please make
Yes.
it easier. I'm begging you. And then over time, we've actually started to like figure out use cases that like do in fact help scale and like find efficiencies. There's a couple that stand out to me. The first one that I thought was really interesting that I've talked about with other demand gen professionals recently is things like using data or using AI to help you like sift through massive amounts of data. So a good like tangible example of that is target account lists. So when you think about ABM, again, you're coming back to it periodically, trying to look for tweaks and ways that you can optimize. Is you're going to look at all the data that you have and try to like sift through it and find areas that need improvement. Where AI can typically help with that is it can look at vast amount of data. It can take hundreds of thousands of inputs or accounts and start to find trends where, like, again, we're talking about scale and efficiency. Before, it would be me or someone on your team that's like a data analyst that would be going over this data over and over again and trying to find those trends and trying to find areas where you can like pull out accounts that maybe are a little bit more likely to convert. So I think using AI to like save time on like data analysis, target accounts is just like one of many examples, I think, where you can use AI to start to sift through large amounts of data, given that demand gen people spend so much time with it. And then I mentioned earlier, I think the lead gen process, and like I'm the closest to this because this is my sole job at Qualified, is again, like looking at the website and looking at our like lead gen process. And I think AI has just made an incredible new area where it can help us make sure there are no like leaks or drop-offs happening in that like marketing to sales handoff in the lead gen process.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit more about that. We obviously have Piper. She's our inbound AI SDRs. I think that's kind of what you're getting at with like opportunities to use AI to fix that lead gen process. Tell me more about your perspective on AI SDRs and what are they capable of?
Yeah, so the first one is, I think, speed to lead. So again, if you have your demand gen engine running, you're looking to come to it and say, like, where are some small areas where I can like pull a little bit more out? Speed to lead is always one of those. I have yet to talk to a demand gen person that hasn't gone back and said, how can we make this process faster? I have leads coming in from forums. I have leads coming in from chat. I have leads coming in from events. These are all leads that as a marketer, I've spent time on, I've spent money on, and I desperately need to get ROI out of them because I've spent the money on it.
And as you think about closing that gap, you mentioned that earlier, that's a perfect like opportunity for you to close that gap. How do we make sure while those leads are hot, we're following up with them, we're getting them into your pipeline versus letting them sit and get stale?
Totally. And I think, again, as those leads are coming in, if you're not fast, there are repercussions to that. Like there's a bunch of data out there that shows if you're not following up within that 5 minutes, it drastically impacts the likelihood that that prospect is then going to choose your company and purchase from you. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One, I think we've just been trained for instant gratification. I know my brain is like, if it's not instant, like it's moving on to something else. And because we have so many like different things happening, and like as a demand gen person, you're really busy. If I go fill out a form and you follow up a day later, I don't remember filling out that form. Like I probably don't even remember why I did it. Like so it mattered in that moment, but it might not matter even the next day. So I think speed to lead and having an AI SDR that can do that instantaneously, but still with like personalization is huge. Because if you think about a human SDR, it's not that they're doing a bad job. It's just that they're constrained by their own time and resources. Like they've got 8 hours in a day. They've got a massive lead queue. If they want to hit that 5-minute rule, they're going to focus on probably the hottest ones or the ones they think are most likely to convert, but they're going to run out of time. And then the other part of that is they need to do good outreach. It can't just be some like generic, like, thanks for filling out our form, book some time here. Like if they really want to make an impact and a lasting memory with that prospect, they're doing some research. Like in our case, they're going to their website and saying like, hey, I noticed on your website you've got XYZ happening. Qualified's going to be great for you for this reason. I noticed you filled out a form. Here, book some time. That takes time to do. So they're very limited by that time constraint and how many prospects they can reach out to, where an AI SDR does not have those time limitations. And it can do that across thousands of leads at any time of day and make sure it's always hitting that like 5-minute rule.
Mm-hmm. And so you talked a little bit about the AI SDR. You get speed to lead, immediate outreach. You're able to reach out to everybody all at once. And then you don't have to kind of go through the qualification criteria anymore. It's not just reach out to MQLs or don't reach out to leads. AI SDRs can reach out to everybody. Can you expand on that a little bit more? Kind of like the value prop for you as a business?
Totally. I think for me, no leads left behind is huge. So when I think about MQLs and like why we came up with a concept of MQLs, it was, again, reps have a limited amount of time in the day to do really good outreach or like book these meetings and to hit their quota, which is what they like really, really care about. They can only focus on so many prospects at a time. And it's somewhere to like 10 to 20 in a day that they can like actually get back to and like make it impactful. As a marketer though, I wish you could talk to every single person because I just don't know that that person isn't a good fit. And again, I probably spent some time and money to get them to the site. Even if they didn't click an ad, which cost me money, they found us somehow, which is typically marketing's doing. Either they heard about us, they came up organically in Google. I don't want to risk leaving that lead behind or not following up with them because there is a chance that they could be pipeline. So I think for an AI SDR to be able to follow up with every single person and start to figure out if they are an actual opportunity gives me so much more peace of mind because I know that there isn't pipeline that's being left on the table. But on the flip side, I would never expect a human SDR to do that. I would never go to our SDRs and be like, hey, I expect you to respond to 100% of the leads that come in because it's a waste of their time. Because if even 80% of those people are disqualified, I've now wasted my SDR's time following up with those leads, and it creates that really bad tension and like misalignment in sales and marketing because they're like, stop asking me to follow up with these trash leads. But again, in AI SDR, they don't care. There is no constraint on that time. So even if they follow up with what we would consider like not good leads, but they find like one diamond in the rough and turns out like that was a lead that was ready to buy, that had budget, that had a project that might have otherwise got missed, that's just more pipeline. That's about those like small tweaks and small efficiencies to the lead gen process that I could not do before without an AI SDR.
Mm-hmm. I feel like AI is now giving you more control to move those levers without just like more budget or more people. All of a sudden we have this other tool in our toolkit to really optimize those efficiencies and help close out on that gap. Sarah, I think that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about how you're seeing the world of demand gen shifting now that we have AI at our fingertips and also giving folks tangible examples of how they can apply it to hit that gap. So thanks for joining me.